Good morning, gentlemen. We're attacking this lesson a little bit differently because, like the last, it builds on the last one that we had. So, you know, where we were combining like terms and it got a little confusing, we had to take a little extra time with it. This is one of those topics. So, we're attacking it a little bit differently today. We're bringing out the whiteboard. So, let's say you have a problem that looks like this. You have -2 plus -2 multiplied by -2 minus -2 divided by +2. If you're wondering where on earth to start, that's okay. Let's review a couple things real quick. One is order of operations, right? PEMDAS. Good old, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. PEMDAS and then left to right. So that's something that's going to help you solve these types of algebraic problems. Following order of operations and moving left to right when you do it. The other thing we want to review is the good old negative positive battleship rule. So, if you have a negative plus a negative, or minus negative, we'll just call it that, minus negative, let's say it's minus -1. Remember that if you take these two lines and you were to put them together, it would make a positive. So, two negatives equal a positive. That's one of the positive and negative number battleship rules. The other one is if you have a positive and a negative number, or a negative and a positive, either way, unfortunately, the negative always wins. So, negative will always win when put up against a positive. So if we have a maybe a plus -2 in here, that's going to be a -2 still. It's just how it works. So, two negatives make a positive. Positive faced with a negative, negative faced with a positive will always equal out to be a negative. So those are the things we want to get straight before we go any further. Order of operations, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. We move left to right, and then we're using these rules of two negatives make a positive, and a negative will always win against a positive sign. Okay, now we're ready to attack this lovely problem. So the first thing we want to do is move left to right with, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, right? So we have a -2 here, so we're just going to note that for right now, because as you remember, P is the first thing in PEMDAS, so that's parentheses, so we're just going to note, okay, we've got a -2 right there, plus, there's some parentheses right there. We'll get that light out of the way. So, -2 times -2. What on earth would that equal if two negatives will make a positive? It's going to be a positive number. So we're going to rewrite it out. It's really important that you write this problem every step of the way. It can get really confusing if you just try to do mental math. Remember, just like yesterday's lesson, this is not a place where we want to be doing mental math. We want to write it down. So, you have -2 plus +4. Also, two positives will always equal a positive, so don't be too worried about, okay, what is that plus? What do those two plus signs, next to each other mean? It's just a positive. And then we still have minus -2 divided by +2. So, in this situation over here, -2 divided by +2. It's the same thing. A negative will always win over a positive sign. So the sign of this answer will be negative. So we would get -2 plus 4. Then we would have minus -1. Now, this is where things get weird. This is still in a parenthesis, right? Even though we said -1, we solved that, it's -1. There's still a subtraction sign right here. So this is why it's really important to write it all out. Don't try to do this all in your head. -2 plus 4 minus -1. Well, we still have to account for the minus -1 part, so the full problem will be -2 plus 4 plus 1. So what does that equal? -2 plus 4. It's -2, and we're moving in a positive direction. So we'll go -2, -1, 1, 2. So that's +2, right? +2 plus 1. Our final answer for this problem will be 3. Really important that you keep track of your parentheses. Really important you keep track of your signs. Watch the sign. You know what I mean. So, we're going to move on to another example here. If you haven't already, please get a scrap piece of paper aside from what you're going to use for the mixed practice, because these problems, we're going to need it. So go ahead, if you don't already have a separate piece of scrap paper, go ahead and get it. Okay, so hopefully you have your scrap piece of paper and your pencil. At this point, this is example 2 from today's lesson, which is lesson 85. If you're able to go ahead and take a look at that and write this big old long thing down, this is example 2 from today's lesson, please pause this video, go ahead, write this whole thing out from example 2, or you can pause it and look at what I have written down here. It's -3, parenthesis 2 minus 4, parenthesis minus 4, in parentheses -2, in parentheses -3, plus, in parentheses -3, in parentheses -4, divided by 2. So go ahead, pause, write this whole thing out. The next thing we're going to do is break this problem down, because this is a long one. So, here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to look for parts that where there isn't a sign in a parenthesis. So a good break for this would be right here. So I'm going to break this down. So we're going to solve this part by itself. And then we're going to solve, so we're going to go here. Okay, next spot is right here. And then we have this. So we're going to solve it basically in 3 parts. So let's start with the first part. Let's go ahead and see what we get here. Remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, we're looking at the parentheses here. And this, we can do this because we're still moving left to right using PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So, 2 minus 4. What on earth is that? I'm going to give you a second to think about it. What is 2 minus 4? -2. So, we have -2 right there. And -3 on the outside. Okay, we're going to shelf that for a minute. Let's go solve the first part of this middle section here as well. So, parentheses first, right? -2 multiplied by -3. We've got 2 negative signs, so our answer is going to be positive. So then we have -4 multiplied, we'll have -4 multiplied by 6. Or excuse me, nope, my bad, wrong one. Well, we will have, we're going to multiply left to right. So, -4 multiplied by -2, that will give us a positive 8. Because remember, multiplication from left to right. So that will give us a positive 8. Positive 8. I'm just writing that positive as a reminder to myself. Times -3. So hopefully I didn't mess you up too much there. We are strictly following left to right PEMDAS. So multiplication, we're going to multiply what's inside the parentheses, and multiply it again by what's in the parentheses. So we're going to shelf that. We're going to go here. -3 minus 4. What would that be? 2 negative signs. It's going to equal a positive, so we end up with 12 divided by 2. Okay, now let's go back here. We have -2 -3 multiplied by -2. We're going to get a positive 6. Again, I'm writing that positive 6 as a reminder to myself that this number is positive. So we have plus 6. We have our little separating line here. Let's solve this part. Positive 8 times 3. Remember, a negative will always trump a positive sign. So this is going to be a negative number. So we have 24. We're drawing this other line here. 12 divided by 2 is a positive 6, right? Remember, no sign, we can assume it's a positive. 12 divided by 2 is 6, so positive 6. This looks a lot more friendly to solve, doesn't it? So we have positive 6 minus 24 plus 6. So, 6, positive 6 minus 24. So we have 6, we're moving in a negative direction. So it's basically 24 minus 6, which will equal negative 18. So we have negative 18, so that part's all done, and then plus 6. So again, we have negative 18, but we're moving in a positive direction. So we will end up with the answer of negative 12. Whew! That was a long one, wasn't it? Go ahead, pause for a second, get up, stretch, do 5 jumping jacks, then come back to this video. And keep your scrap piece of paper out. Okay, this is example 3 from today's lesson, which is lesson 85. And we have another long one here, but we're going to work through it together using PEMDAS, which is order of operations, right? And our knowledge of how positive and negative signs work. Remember, 2 negatives make a positive. Negative will always overcome a positive sign. So, let's go over it. We're going to break it down because we're moving left to right, right? We're going to note at this point that we have a negative 2 in parentheses. Then we have this whole thing in brackets, which is what we're going to focus on next. So, negative 5 times negative 4 times negative 5. 2 negatives will equal a positive. So we are going to have positive 20 in this parenthesis. Positive 20. Then we have bracket parenthesis, negative 3 minus positive 20. So, we have to look at this negative as being multiplied by what's in the parenthesis there. So that is actually going to turn this into a negative 20 because we're basically multiplying this subtraction sign by positive 20. Remember, negative always wins. So, we end up with negative 3 minus 20, which would then equal negative, excuse me, woo. No. Excuse me. Okay, misspoke a little bit on that one. So, we have negative 3 minus 20. But, we have to remember that this is technically still in brackets. That's the part where I ran afoul there. So, this part is technically in brackets, and what's outside that bracket but a negative sign? So, everything in these brackets are getting multiplied by a negative sign. So, that changes everything in the bracket to a positive. Makes sense? So, we end up with positive 23, because this turns into a positive 3, this turns into a positive 20, 3 plus 20 equals 23. Now, what we can't forget over here is that we have a negative 2. Remember that this is a positive 23. If it doesn't have a sign, we're going to assume it's positive. So, positive 23, and then we have a negative 2. So, negative 2 plus 23 will equal our answer, which is 21. These are some rough questions, so don't beat yourself up too much. We're going to continue to practice them. So, what I would like you to do, we're going to cover functions another day. So, what I would like you to do is, for the lesson practice, solve A and solve B. So go ahead, pause this video, solve A, solve B, come back here to check your answers. I know this is a longer lesson, trying to break it down as best we can. These are hard. This is algebra getting real, is what this is. But go ahead, pause the video, A and B from the lesson practice. See how you do. Okay, So, here is the answer for A. We're going to do the same thing here where we break it down. So I'm going to draw imaginary lines here. I'm just going to note for now that there is, let me get that light out of the way. Okay, there is a -3 right there. And we have a plus -3, -3 multiplied by each other. So I'm going to take that as its own segment and then this part as its own segment. So -3, I'm just going to bring that down in its parenthesis for right now. That's where it's going to stay. Then I'm going to draw an imaginary line, just so I segment it. So now we have -3 times -3. What does that equal? 2 negatives make a positive, right? So we're going to get +9 for that. +9. Remember that there is another positive here. 2 positives are still a positive, so no big deal. Line here. Now let's solve this part. So first thing we're going to do is divide, right? So we'll divide what's in the parentheses. So we have +3, or -3 divided by +3. That's technically a negative number. So that would be -1. So that would be our answer. But we have this negative sign right there. So negative times -1 becomes +1. So we end up with -3 plus 9 plus 1. So what does that equal? -3 plus 9 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. Your answer should have been 7 for A. Go ahead and pause. Unless you have already done B, in which case, just let this video roll. Okay, here's the answer for B. So, there are a few different ways that this can be solved. As long as you get the same answer at the end, you know you did it right. If it's a different answer, you know you did it wrong. That's the good thing about math. So, here we go. We're going to break it up. I'm just going to note for the time being that there is a -3 in parentheses right there. I have a negative sign on the outside of the bracket, so I'm going to want to pay attention to that because I'm going to use it later. Let's go ahead and solve left to right parentheses inside of these brackets. So we have -5 times -6. Well, 2 negatives make a positive 30. Now, here's where we encounter a problem, because there's also a negative sign right here. This negative sign, it's like it's being multiplied by everything. So it's overwriting the positive and it's making it a negative. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So we have -30. Then we have -4. Now, there's several ways that this can work out. The order in which we're doing it here is we have -4 minus 30. But I still have some brackets that I need to pay attention to. Because remember this negative sign? It's coming into play right now. It's about to make everything positive. Because it's being multiplied by everything in the bracket. So it's turning it all positive. So we have +4 plus 30. So this is going to equal out to be 34. Now, what do we still have that we need to take care of right here? We need to bring down this -3, right? -3 plus 34. It's basically like 34 minus 3. Would be 31. If you got 31 for this problem, that is correct. Congratulations. And you're ready to go ahead and go on to the mixed practice, either odds or evens. Best of luck, gentlemen.